Iwojima is one of the small islands in Japan which is about 1200 km south of Tokyo. In 1945 this island became a silent witness to the standard horrors between Japan and the American Sea, considering Iwojima as a stepping stone to make it easier to invade mainland Japan by building its military base there. So what steps were taken by Japan to withstand the American attack? Okay, find a comfortable position, and here is the letter from Iwojima. Iwojima 1944. A few months before the war began, the Japanese troops under the leadership of Admiral Ozugi were ordered to dig trenches on the coast, to build a line of defense to meet the attack of American troops, who would come there after they invaded Saipan Island. That day General Kuribayashi, accompanied by his aide Lieutenant Fuji, had just landed on Iwojima Island. They were also welcomed by Admiral Ozugi and his staff. General Kuribayashi, who did not know very well about the island, and immediately asked Ozugi to accompany him around the island. In the evening, as the general begins to study the map of the island, Lieutenant Ito arrives, which reports that there were only a few Japanese air fleet left, because they lost a lot. Of the air fleet was very supportive of the Japanese troops on Saipan Island, knowing that the general ordered Lieutenant Ito to coordinate with the army and focus on defense on Suribachi Hill. General Kuribayashi, who is in charge of strategy, continues to circle the island to predict every possible, starting with finding out where the American troops will land and also where the troops will move next. And coincidentally, the general is visited by his fellow colonial missionaries, but the arrival brought bad news where most of the combined naval fleet had been sunk by the Americans during the battle in the Mariana Bay, as well as the transport ships that brought reinforcements to Iwojima. Of course, the general was surprised to learn that Japan would soon lose and his efforts to defend Iwojima would only end in vain. Not wanting to give up quickly, General Kuribayashi immediately changed all the strategies that had been prepared previously and focused his strength on making underground defenses on higher ground. The region was divided into 4 sectors. The first was the seafront defense line, then Mount Suribachi, Motoyama and Higashiyama, Admiral Suki, and the others. Others clearly disagree because without maximum seafront defense, enemy troops would quickly enter the island, and also according to him digging caves will be a waste of time and energy. Not to mention the American troops will soon be there. The general also emphasized that the safety of Iwojima depended on the remaining troops there because both land and sea reinforcements had been defeated, as well as air support itself had been flown in to defend the city of Tokyo. Meanwhile, the troops there continued to be trained to prepare for war. Not only armies who voluntarily enlisted Japanese men who were old enough, even civilians were required to join the fight, including one of them, SAIGO, who used to be just a baker, was forced to leave a wife who was pregnant young. A few days later, the Japanese were still digging. General Kuribayashi also ordered his subordinates to speed up the work. The next day the commander of the command gathered and told about the strategy to welcome the American attack. The command said if their troops lost in all aspects, both from armaments and troops, therefore they were ordered to focus on attacking the American medical team, for that was the only weakness of the American side, that wounded American soldiers would not survive. For the effectiveness of his strategy, the general shifted the position of Admiral Ozugi, who looked unwell, and appointed Admiral Ichimaru to take his place, but suddenly a siren sounded, a sign that they were in danger. And sure enough, a bunch of American warplanes flew right over the island and destroyed the Japanese army base. Japan, which lacked weapons, was certainly not prepared for such a surprise attack. Fortunately, the caves there had been completely excavated, so that most of the Japanese troops took refuge in it. A few days later saw a convoy of hundreds of American ships that managed to seize the island of Saipan, and now, they were on their way to Iwojima with their 70,000 troops. The general immediately issued his orders to prepare troops at 4 predetermined points. Before the roll began, the general ignited the spirit of the Banzai soldiers, and he ordered that all his soldiers must fight to the death lest the Americans succeed in occupying the island and making it a military base to attack the city of Tokyo. The general also emphasized that no one should hope to return home safely, while still breathing, defend the island to the last drop of blood, because the fate of the family at home depends on their struggle today. All Japanese soldiers started collecting personal belongings and preparing for the battle of the death. Not only soldiers, but superiors also seemed to write farewell letters, even though they knew the letter would not reach their families, but at least it could cure their homesickness. And thousands of American troops had landed on the island. The Japanese troops were already in their respective positions, but the general still withheld the order to fire before all the American forces landed. The surprise attack was quite effective in uprooting hundreds of American troops, but it didn't take long for the Americans, who were carrying heavy weapons, to easily bombard the Japanese defenses until the Japanese defense line on the coast had been crossed. But at least a meager number of Japanese were able to kill 1,000 Americans, while the Japanese troops on Mount Suribachi were able to take 20,000 American troops' lives, including destroying 80 tanks. However, because the number of American troops was overwhelming in the end, the Japanese troops were overwhelmed and began to run out of ammunition. Even some of the weapons were destroyed by the Americans in the absence of help. Colonel Wadaki also reported to General Kuribayashi that Mount Suribachi could no longer be defended. Therefore, D asked to die honorably by performing harakiri. General Kuribayashi refused the request and ordered the remaining troops to join forces in the northern cave, but the colonel ignored the order and chose to do his bidding anyway. The colonel issued an official warrant to be addressed to Captain Tanida as the command there. Feel they have no other choice. One by one the remaining soldiers perform harakiri, which they believe is the only way to die with honor. He also convinced one of his friends who had not committed suicide that he heard the general's orders over the radio to join forces in the northern cave of Motoyama. Neither of them wanted to die. They immediately headed there. Not only the two of them together with the Japanese survivors. The journey to Motoyama is quite dangerous, where they have to get out of the cave and explore the open. Of course, the trip was not as easy as one might think. In the night, the American troops who were already on the alert outside immediately pelted them with hot lead. Lucky for me and her friend Shimizu, they both survived because they didn't run and chose to crawl, even though it took a long time to get to the other side of the cave. Lieutenant Ito, who was in command there, must have been furious to learn that the soldier who was supposed to defend Suribachi had run away. Lieutenant Ito almost killed them because he was considered a coward and traitor. Again, they were lucky when General Kuribayashi appeared and said that he ordered the remaining troops in Suribachi to withdraw. In anticipation of an increasingly severe defeat, General Kuribayashi tried to ask for help from the headquarters and ordered Lieutenant Ito and his soldiers to stay there. Actually, General Kuribayashi thinks realistically and doesn't arbitrarily follow his emotions. However, because the other superiors constantly contradicted the plans that had been prepared as well as possible, it was chaotic, which ended up reducing the number of Japanese troops, including General Hayashi, who ordered Lieutenant Ito to join the Ya army to retake Mount Suribachi. SAIGO and his partner Shimizu refused because they knew that it was not ordered by General Kuribayashi, but because they are subordinates. What can be done? They also only followed orders from superiors led by Lieutenant Ito. They began to sneak into the enemy's defenses. Arriving there, Lieutenant Ito was surprised, knowing that General Hayashi's troops weren't there. Instead, they were forced to retreat because they were outnumbered by the enemy troops. Lieutenant Ito was furious to learn that Hayashi's troops had not attacked. They are the protectors in the cave. Colonel Mizi also confirmed that General Hayashi's order had been cancelled by General Kuribayashi. Lieutenant Ito, who was confused about which order to receive, decides to carry out an attack with his group, while SAIGO and some soldiers from Suribachi joined the colonel of mission. But only halfway, Lieutenant Ito ordered his troops to withdraw and join the colonel mission, while he will attack the enemy tank alone. In the Higashiyama defense cave, General Kuribayashi received a report from Admiral Ichimaru that many of their troops died during the attack on Chidori airfield, where General Hayashi did not heed the order to withdraw. As a result, 1,000 Japanese troops died in vain there. Not only that, the headquarters also reported that they could not send reinforcements to Iwojima, instead suggested that the troops at Iwojima continue to fight and die with honor and dignity for their country. By their Colonel Mizi's side, they managed to capture one of the wounded American soldiers. The Japanese soldiers advised to kill him immediately, but Colonel Content refused and instead ordered to treat him. Colonization is also said to imagine if those who were in the position of American soldiers, indeed they hoped to be saved. After awakening, the colonel of the mission had a conversation with him. At first the American was reluctant to say anything, but after school and mission said he had lived in America, as well as being an Olympic athlete there. At last they became acquainted with each other. From this, we can learn that the enemy is also human, and humane manners above all. Even knowledgeable people don't necessarily have humane etiquette. And in a nutshell, now they are almost out of stock of food and water has run out. The only defense cave left is Higashiyama. Although General Kuribayashi realized that they would not win, he intended to lead the attack on the enemy. Before leaving, he also wrote a farewell letter to his family. To prevent important documents from falling into enemy hands, SAIGO was ordered to stay and burn everything, but SAIGO didn't burn the whole thing. He buried a bag full of letters addressed to the soldiers' families, including General Kuribayashi's outpourings. SAIGO hopes someone finds the letter and becomes evidence of the desperate struggle of the Japanese troops in defending their country. With the remnants of energy without eating and drinking, the Japanese troops led by General Kuribayashi made the final attack. However, due to being outnumbered and armed, they had to die, including General Admiral Ichimaru, who was still trying to save his general to a safer place. The general felt his duty had failed, ordered Ichimaru to behead him. Haven't had time to do that yet. Ichimaru was hit by enemy fire. SAIGO, the last soldier, somehow got there. Then the general asked him to bury his body in a place where no one would find it. And in the end, the general ended his life by shooting himself, using a gift gun from a high-ranking American military friend, while SAIGO, who was exhausted, was rescued by American soldiers, who chose not to kill him. At the end of the film, after decades, the researchers managed to find the letters buried by SAIGO. The letters became necessary evidence of historical heritage for Japan. From that sound, this film was made, and the film ended.